Professor Krauss, thank you very much for your presentation on the atheist worldview.
It's not a worldview.
I think it was actually more like a dialogue, nice to chat between you two guys. Actually, I was wondering when I should jump in and stop you guys. You know. Anyway, I'm sure Aristotle and Plato did the same thing. But now we've got something to sort of come back on from Professor. He's given a lot of food for thought, and no doubt Hamza, in about 10 minutes,
thank you.
Possibly come back and answer some of those contentions brought up by Professor Krauss.
Thank you very much, Professor Krauss. Well, first and foremost, I think most of what he said was a red herring. A red herring is this very smelly fish that you pull across the path of running dogs. And the reason it was a red herring, because he said that I spoke about science. I specifically said he knows better than I do. I specifically didn't use it as my key argument for the finitude of the universe, and he wanted to correct me on something that I didn't even mention myself. This is what you call, not rhetoric, not intellectual argument, it's what you call sophistry. It's rhetoric with crap, frankly. Now, and I'm not saying it to be rude, because it's a typical Kraussian fashion. A Kraussian fashion trying to win over the whole audience, make a hoo-ha in the beginning. And you know, imagine I did that when I walked into, one day I had interfaith dialogue. And imagine I walked into a Jewish mosque or a hall that was public, and I basically said, I don't want to do things your way, but I want to discuss with you, but I'm not going to do things your way. Is that tolerance? Is that how you connect with other people? He wants to know about our tradition, but he won't even ask them, why do you have this? And another straw man, justice and equal rights. You think they're saying that because they don't have any justice or equal rights? My wife is up there, ask my wife. What's the matter with you? See, these presumptions from Fox News, you're an academic, but when you talk about Islam, it's based on the Fox News narrative, and I'm going to expose this in a minute. Now, the first point I want to make. Now, you used the word a priori more than 3 times, but you rejected deductive thinking. I mean, isn't a priori deductive? I mean, you can't have your cake and eat it, sir.
I tried to talk on your level.
That's the first point. The second point I'd like to make. Actually, let me calm down. The second point I would like to make is that, see, we're not rejecting inductive arguments. Of course we're not. You're forgetting the inductive method, the scientific method. Do you know where it came from, sir? Do you know where it came from?
I know. In fact, there's a remarkable scientific mathematical tradition in the Arab world, if that's what you're going to talk about.
I'm going to talk about Ibn al-Haytham in his book on optics.
Yeah.
Read the works of David Lindbergh and others, historians of philosophy and science. And they say it came from Islam. You know why? Because Islam doesn't reject...
No, they came from the Arab world. They didn't come from Islam.
Well, let me give you the link. Let me give you the link. Okay? أَفَلَا يَنْظُرُونَ إِلَى الْإِبِلِ كَيْفَ خُلِقَتْ. Have you not seen empiricism, the creative thing like a camel, and how it was formed, or how it was created? This was the basis, and this was the poetic justification for the entire scientific method. As Muslims, we go where the science takes us. But we're not stupid. Deductive arguments, they are necessarily true. If you wanted to discuss my argument, you had to break down the premises, which you didn't. You just taught us talking about the infinite and the circle and the circumference. I knew we were going to do this, because it's all mathematics. You remember what I said?
No, it's a physical circle.
Yeah, but let me make a point. Let me make a point. I said the quantifiable infinite cannot be actualized in the physical world, something that you agreed with. 1 second. And I said there's nothing wrong with the qualitative infinite. And qualitative infinites can exist infinitely. For example, mathematicians discuss. Yes, so where's the infinite there?
That's the length. You think this is a length is a physical quantity?
That is.
Length a physical quantity.
That is, yeah.
Okay, the length of this and the length of that, okay, the ratio of those two lengths is an infinite number.
Yes, of course it is.
Okay.
But what is that length? What is that length?
1. This is a length 1. Is 1 Krauss.
Okay, can you...
These are pi Krauss.
1 second. Can you measure the straight line, and can you measure the circumference? Yes or no?
I can measure it.
Well, that's quantifiable. Yes. What you're talking about is in the realm of mathematical realm of discourse, which has axioms and conventions, which makes sense. I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm agreeing with what you already agreed with in your own book, which from a quantifiable, discrete perspective, you can't have an infinite. That's the point I'm trying to make.
Discrete.
The discrete parts.
But who says it has to be discrete?
Oh, but that's your presupposition. That's your presupposition. You brought your assumptions, Fox News, by the way, and other stuff, and you think you've got an answer. I have time. Let me finish this, please.
Okay, because we're going to teach you different calculus. Newton invented a long time
I know,
ago.
but calculus is based on axioms and conventions in the mathematical realm of discourse.
It describes how things work.
Yes. Let me make a point. So, that's the first point. Oh, dear. Okay, then you spoke about, for example, 0 is simple as Occam's razor. Again, you've misconstrued what Occam's razor is. Occam's razor is not only the simplest explanation, but it has to have greater explanatory scope and explanatory power. 0 has no explanatory scope or power concerning the origins of the universe from that perspective.
I'll explain it how it does.
The other point I like to make is you spoke about, for example, hell and justice, and look at all these people that are going to hell. Again, another huge straw man. You've misrepresented Islamic theology. We have a very nuanced theology, sir. I think the best thing to do, if you were sincere, you would have said, you know, Hamza, I don't get this. I haven't read this before. I'm just making my own mind up because I watch videos of Christopher Hitchens and he's an authority to me. I don't know much. Can you tell me what Islam says about this issue? That would have been better, wouldn't it? But again, it's a straw man. And when it comes to things like hell, we believe God is all just and all merciful, okay? No one disagrees with the concept of punishment, okay? You're not going to disagree with the concept of punishment, are you? So when it comes to people who haven't heard about Islam, there's a whole array of theologians like Ibn Taymiyyah and Al-Ghazali who said that there's going to be another form of justice for them. They may be tested on the Day of Judgment based on other prophetic traditions. It's not as simple as that. Okay, homosexuality is a sin. Again, you try to put words in my mouth, and that's not nice. That's not nice.
I asked you questions.
You did, but I don't know if you try to answer them for me, which is quite interesting. Now, see, we don't believe homosexual tendencies per se, are sinful. It's the manifestation of the homosexual act in public is sinful. Because we believe in our theology, let me just make the point, that we're given a package. We all have tendencies. People have tendencies, you know, the polygamous, for example, or other people have tendencies that may be seen negative or taboo. Other people have tendencies concerning various different things. And we believe this is a package that God has given us. But we have an empowering philosophy which says that God, okay, when He gives you these tendencies, whatever they are, whatever kind of inclinations we have, we use our aql, our intellect, by understanding the divine reality and what He wants from us, because God would know me better than I know myself. And He would say, fine, you have these tendencies, this is how you shape them. This is how you control them. Like, we don't believe in, like, we should be agitated purely based on the bestial aspects of man, whether it's heterosexual or homosexual. And by the way, you know, saying off to your mother is equivalent major sin as being a homosexual. So the point I'm trying to say is we don't condemn people per se. We don't say, you know what, I'm going to kill you. We appreciate every human being. They have spiritual needs, but we're not going to make up our own religion. We're not going to follow the Kraussian religion, whatever he says. We're going to follow the divine reality. If he says homosexuality is a sin, it's a sin. Just like drinking alcohol is a sin for the Muslim. Or for example, being harmful to human beings is a sin. Right? Just because I have a tendency and I'm a martial artist and I want to harm people, does that mean now, you know, God is wrong just because I have that tendency? I mean, that's not right. Anyway, I'm still looking for some strong counter-arguments you made to my points.
There were no points to actually make any counter-arguments.
Well, there were, because you didn't... okay, let's just put it simply.
Infinity doesn't exist. Yes, it does. Okay.
You didn't. No, I said the quantifiable infinite doesn't exist. I agree the infinite exists. Again, another straw man. The point I'm trying to say is this. We have a deductive argument that the universe is finite. If it's finite, it began to exist. If it began to exist, there are some logical possibilities. Please entertain those logical possibilities. If not, it's equivalent to you coming to my house, having a coffee, I'm talking to you, but you're talking to the window. And I know you have better morals and manners than that, because I know you're highly respected. And we do all respect you in some paradoxical way. But the point is, the point I'm trying to say, Professor Krauss, is that I think it's only fair if you want to pick and choose from the Fox News narrative that you actually trying to change that stance and say, right, what does Sharia law say? Do you have a book of Sharia law at home?
I asked you so I could learn.
No, but you were telling me. Do you have a book? Okay, do you have a book on Sharia law?
No.
And you
Because
make
it's based on
judgments,
nonsense.
and okay, I have a book on atheism, I think it's based on nonsense,
Great.
but I give you the intellectual epistemic respect to read your worldview. But you've come here
my book is a book on
blasé,
atheism, it's a book on science.
you've come here blasé, almost arrogant, I don't want to judge you, and saying, you know, it's all rubbish, I'm not going to take any of his arguments, I know better than you, which you said that, and I do agree in physics you do. And you've come here making judgments on Sharia law. You don't even have a book on Sharia law.
That's why I asked questions.
And the point is...
Look, I'm sorry, that's why I asked questions. I asked you questions so I could learn. I asked what you thought as someone whose opinions I'm supposed to respect. And I wanted to know, did you think it was wrong? And I wanted to know why. There's no sense why homosexuality is wrong. I wanted to know what common sense tells you that homosexuality is wrong, except some self-proclaimed prophet telling you with no evidence.
There's a different point. Okay. Okay, let me ask Professor Krauss a question. Why is incest wrong?
It's not clear to me that it's wrong.
Okay.
It's clear to me. There's never no. Listen to me. Listen to me.
Wait. Let's give him the respect, please. He's got a justification.
You ask me a question, and if you want me to answer, I will.
Yeah, of course. Do it.
Okay. The point is, most societies have a taboo on incest, and it's an empirical one. Generally, incest produces genetic defects.
Yes.
Okay. And so in general, there's a physiological reason and a societal one why incest is wrong.
Yes.
Okay. But if you ask me the question, is it? And this is an interesting question. We are in. By the way, there's an ingrained incest taboo in almost all societies for that reason.
Sure.
Because societies want to persist, so it works. But if you ask me a priori, for example, the question, if a brother and a sister loved each other and used contraception, is there something absolutely morally wrong about that? And then, by the way, and it was once, and they went off and it didn't affect anything else, I'd have to think about it, because I don't think there's any absolute condemnation of that fact. If they love each other and care for each other and they go off and it doesn't affect anything else, would I recommend it? No. Would I be particularly happy about it? But would I be willing to listen to those arguments if they were rational? Maybe.
Okay, good. So, see, this is precisely the point I'm trying to make, Professor Krauss, is that I find it quite interesting. Someone who adopts an atheist position would have strong moral judgments about a religious tradition, whereas your moral judgments, at best, are relative and subjective. Now, when you look about moral theory, from an Islamic perspective and a religious perspective, you see that objective morals, that even pointing the finger and saying, you know, you're wrong, you're nonsense, Sharia law is backward, these kind of strong emotive things, I think we can only be that emotive and strong in an objective sense if you have God as a grounding for your objective moral values. Because if you take God out of the picture, he's the only concept that transcends human subjectivity. Social pressure, you know, that doesn't work. Look what happened in Nazi Germany. You know, for example, evolution makes it end up being ephemeral and empty. If you look at the philosopher of science, Michael Rules, he said, you think loving thy neighbor as thyself is like you're referring above and beyond yourself. But essentially, it has no true meaning. It's just a product of survival and reproduction. So from this perspective, you don't have an ontological grounding for objective moral truths. The best you could do, what a lot of atheists have done, is, well, we believe in moral realism, which is, moral truths are just moral truths because they are. Well, Islam just is, and the Prophet Muhammad upon him peace just is, and the Quran just is. That's not an argument. So the reason I asked you that question, sir, was to say, how on earth, from an intellectual perspective, can we point the finger at religions from a moral perspective? And especially today's the irony is, most of your articulation against Islam has had a moral vibe to it, not a rational one, because you didn't deal with the premises of my argument.
I did.
No, you didn't. You talked about infinity. And
I talked about causality, infinity, the words that you were throwing out.
Yes, and what did you say about causality?
I said, in fact, that it's quite likely that beginning of the universe causality isn't a good question. But if you understood the physics, you understand
your presupposition of causality...
No, it's not my presupposition.
It is.
It's time doesn't exist.
Yes.
Space doesn't exist.
Okay, think about the statement, something produces an effect. Mm-hmm. Where is time as a definition there?
Produces.
No, it could be atemporal.
What do you mean atemporal? You explain to me clearly what you mean in a physical way. And okay? Don't just give me English language. Give me a physical example.
Okay, let me give you, like your nothing is a physical example, yeah?
Well, you haven't described what my nothing is yet. You read the preface, like a number of people did, but I don't know if you got very far.
Actually, I read the whole book. I liked it.
What's my nothing?
Your nothing is...
What is my nothing?
Your nothing is quantum.
No.
It is.
No. No space, no time, no laws, no nothing.
But that's still a quantum haze.
No.
That is.
No, there's no quantum. There's no universe. There's no universe. Nothing. Zero, zip, nada.
So why did you say in your own book then that we would reduce to our own quantum haze?
Hamza, can I?
Yep.
Can I?
Well, he took a lot of
interrupt?
my time. He took a lot of my time.
Yeah.
Well, did you?
It's
you
kind
took on
of
my time to
dissolving
answer my
into a
question.
discussion.
So we'll continue the discussion.
Oh, we will do.
To pontificate.
No, of course.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Thanks very much, Hamza. Please come and sit down, brother. I didn't want to stop you in mid-flow there, but over to Professor.
There must be some Greek in Professor Krauss.
Look, okay, well, we can continue the discussion because it should be a discussion. My point is that the question, I repeat again, is what's more sensible? And what's more sensible, ultimately, is what produces more rational actions. And I'm sorry, if you talk about tolerance, I get so tired of hearing people talk about tolerance, but then I hear people talking about blasphemers. I should be allowed to blaspheme all I want, because ridicule is an important part of inquiry and discussion. Sometimes ridiculing something illuminates it. And I hear about blasphemers, I hate to say it, and this may be a complete misapplication of Islam. It could be that Islam, as it's practiced in many countries in the world, is a misapplication of Islam. But all I can see is intolerance when I see those principles applied. Intolerance to blasphemers, intolerance to homosexuals, intolerance in general. Now, the other thing I want to say is, this God, if we ask what's sensible, why would we think that this unproven God that is supposed to be the basis of not just Islam, but all religions, different gods, different characteristics, but the Islamic God, much like the Judeo-Christian God, is a real creep. This is a God worse than Saddam Hussein. Instead of torturing you just for your life, tortures you for infinity, forgive me the word, but eternity, let me use that word. Eternity for not believing. For not believing, you're tortured for infinity. The tortures are actually described in the Quran, and you know it as well as I do. And the point is, if you just ask yourself common sense, if you were a divine being, say you had an ant colony that you made in your house, would you be offended if those ants didn't pay homage to you well, let's start with 50 times a day before Muhammad cut it down to 30 and then 5. Would you be offended if those ants didn't pay homage to you 5 times a day? And if they didn't look up to you or didn't recognize your existence, would you destroy them? No, I mean, it just seems so petty. So why should we believe in a hateful, unmerciful, petty, sadomasochistic, homophobic, sexist God? It's just irrational. It's not sensible. There's nothing. And the point is, and I don't want to single out Islam here. And I know I'm offending some people, but the same is true for the God of Moses. Okay? If you really believe that the scriptures were literally true, the morals in that book are reprehensible. It's okay when an angels appear to do a lot of things, including coming down and making revelations to Muhammad, which Muhammad didn't write down. As far as I know, the first example of the Quran was 20 years after he died, so there was a lot of talk. And some of that talk got turned into perfect writing well after Muhammad was dead. But those angels come down. But in this case, in the case of course, Lot, as you know, the angels came down, and they were men. They came in the form of men, which I don't think is allowed in certain versions of the Quran, at least. But anyway, they did. And then they were going to be raped. So what did Lot do? Of course, he said, don't rape them. Take my daughters. Because daughters are dispensable. What kind of moral lesson is that you want to learn? Okay? Now, I'm sorry, that's from the Bible. Actually, that's from my religion. Okay, or my ancestors' religion. I have none. Okay, so those are the kind of moral lessons that I find not sensible. And so I'm happy I picked the Old Testament and not the Quran to talk about immoral intolerance. The idea of punishing people for eternity for choosing to find something unlikely is not tolerant. The idea of punishing them in vicious, evil, ugly ways for all eternity is not merciful. It is the opposite of rational common sense. Now, in terms of explanatory things, let me just spend a few minutes teaching a little bit of science. So, if you have an infinite temporal, let's say time exists beyond our universe. Let's just allow for that because it's easier to describe that. And let's say our universe, a universe can, given the laws of nature, spontaneously come into existence. Okay? Then it will come into existence. It will come into existence at some time. And the fact that it came into existence at that time need not have any reason. It need not have any reason why it was that time rather than some other time. But whatever time it happens, it will come into existence. And people can say, there's some significance to that. But it must happen somewhere at some time, and there need not be any significance, any purpose, any intelligence for why it happened now instead of then. It's guaranteed to happen at some point. Now, if you say, during that creation, there are laws, one of which is the laws of quantum mechanics, which can create a universe with zero total energy. By the way, and by creating a universe, I mean a universe that didn't exist. There was no space, there were no times, and no laws, in fact. And then you come in and you say, okay, if that universe is created spontaneously, it must be created at some time. So a universe must come into existence. In fact, an infinite number of universes can come into existence if time is infinite. Okay? It's certainly possible. Then a universe will come into existence, and you can say, let me predict the properties of that universe. Well, lo and behold, the properties of that universe happen to be exactly the properties of the universe we live in, including the structure of the fluctuations of the cosmic microwave background that collapse to produce all the galaxies and all the stars and the planets and you and me. That's explanatory. There's no explanation at that level in any way in your book. So the explanation of a universe that could come into existence from nothing without any purpose, without any planning, without any reason is explanatory. Now, lest I be misconstrued, that is just plausible. Because we do not have a full scientific theory. But to make the claim, as I know you've often made, that because that there are certain things we will never understand is to misunderstand science. There are lots of things we don't understand today, and that's the reason to go out and do science. It's just like Darwin said, he said, in the evolution of species, I'm describing the evolution of species. I'm not describing the origin of life. We'll never understand the origin of life. We'll no sooner understand the origin of life than we understand the origin of matter. Well, of course, he didn't realize that we'd one day understand the origin of matter. Just as I expect in your lifetime and my lifetime, we'll understand the origin of life. We'll understand how chemistry turns into biology by doing experiments, testing, and not forcing our predilection that it's impossible. I had a debate recently where somebody said, it's impossible for non-life to turn into life. Well, that's a nice statement. It's a nice belief. And it's a belief you can have, but it's a belief that can be wrong. And that's the great thing about science, which you can call atheism if you wish. It's you're willing to change your beliefs. You're not assuming the answers before you ask the question. You're not assuming you know what's divinely right just because you interpret a certain book to mean a certain thing, and someone else may interpret it to mean something else. You will agree there are different interpretations of every book, including the Bible and the Quran. And so to presume that you know divine truth before you've asked the universe is not sensible. And I don't think I'll take any more time.